I chose Omaha Beach, 1944, by Robert Capa. This is the picture as it was displayed when I was looking for it online in different places. What is Capa showing us in this picture? It's a picture of a soldier struggling to get onto Omaha Beach out of his boat. The soldier is clearly shown struggling. Many soldiers had to depart the boats quite a ways away from the beach, even in their full gear, jumping out into water that was sometimes above their heads. You can see the soldier in Kappa's picture clearly straining his neck to keep himself above the level of the surf while struggling with his equipment. This is a photograph of Huston Riley, is the soldier in question. It was thought to be some other different soldiers. In some of the articles that I found, they did actually interview Huston Riley where he recounts his interactions with Kappa at the beach. Again, this is a picture of that struggling soldier trying to get where they need to be away from their boat onto the beach while under heavy attack, and again straining to get where they need to go. This picture was taken on June 6th of 1944 as part of the D-Day landings. The scene is the D-Day landing. This is Omaha Beach particularly. The landings were in Normandy. There were many different beaches, some of which had photographers on them, but Kappa's was one of only 4 people who were able to get authorization to take those pictures. The war in the photograph is the Second World War. The Second World War was fought by the Axis powers, which included Germany, Japan, Italy, some other nations, but those were the 3 largest ones. And they were fighting the Allied powers of the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and the Soviet Union were the larger ones involved. But again, also other powers were involved in terms of different forces and different units being available. This particular photograph was of American soldiers fighting German soldiers, although there are no German soldiers in the photograph, only American soldiers. Um, the larger war at hand was about great many things from Japanese oil imports through Germans' reaction to the situation after World War One and their dire economic circumstances. This particular battle, when this photo was taken, the goal of the D-Day landings was the Western Allies wanting to open a third front in Europe. They had Eastern Front was mainly being led by Soviet forces, although some Americans were embedded there. Also, the Americans and British and other allies had opened up a front in Italy and going up from the south of Italy up to the north. However, the mountains were in the way and it was not seen as a viable way to get into Germany. The D-Day landing's goal was to get that foothold in France and use that as a way to get to Germany and meet the Soviet Union in Germany rather than have the Soviet Union continue forward and westward or eastward, westward. The photographer for this picture was Frank Cappa. He's the same photographer that we wrote about last week in The Falling Soldier from the Spanish Civil War. Capa was known for photojournalism throughout different wars. He went through the Spanish Civil War, as we talked about. He went through World War II. He also covered wars in Indochina as well. So he was a war photographer both before and after World War II. Capa typically seems to have chosen pictures that focus on individuals rather than larger battle scenes. He's not standing back taking pictures of a large scene of a tank battle. He's not standing at the end of a trench line taking pictures of a great many soldiers shooting over the trench. He does have some group pictures, but they seem to be less the focus, and they certainly don't seem to be the more well known ones. The elements in this photo are movement. The blurred property of the photo gives a sense of motion. We can kind of feel the waves moving up and down. We can feel the sense of urgency as the soldier's trying to move. It gives that sense of chaotic movement that Capa was trying to portray. The blurring actually was not something done on purpose. He did not try and change the film speed or anything like that to try and create a motion blur in his picture. It was actually a result of mishandling of the film during development. Although his editor, John Morris, believes that that creation of motion did make it a better picture, as he was quoted in a couple different articles, both the Time article I used and the Skylighters article. The emphasis focal point is the soldier down at the bottom. In the framing or cropping, whichever one they did after it, the soldier is clearly centered at the bottom of the picture. You can see that struggle. While the soldier is not in focus, it does seem to be more in focus than anything else in the picture, creating that focal point, drawing it down to the more interesting action part of the picture. Also, whether by default or by design, shapes are a huge part of this picture. There are no terribly natural shapes available. All of the shapes are very geometric and mechanical, and most of that is due just to the setting of the picture. This is a war zone full of man-made material. This is the different devices that the Germans had laid on the beaches for the different boats to try and run themselves aground on. You can see the X-shaped things, the pylons in the background. Even the soldier, while an organic human being, has all of his equipment on and displaying himself with all of these various geometric shapes. The only somewhat non-geometric shapes being the rounded helmet that still looks very manufactured as opposed to a natural shape. Coppa wanted us to see and feel the chaos of the moment. He captured that fantastically well. He was in different articles, such as the Time article and the Skylight article. Coppa was mentioning how he wasn't necessarily framing photos before he was shooting them. He was shooting them on the move, holding up his camera, taking shots, seeing what he got. Definitely taking his pictures very chaotically, which comes across in the pictures. Seeing the courage of the soldiers involved. By showing this one lonely soldier in this desperate attempt to keep his head above water and get onto the beach, but while keeping that focus on the face and the determination on it, it humanizes that picture. In fact, again, Coppa's editor was mentioned that by humanizing that, it let individuals put themselves in that place of chaos. It helped people realize the courage that had to be involved in being there and doing that and trying to keep yourself moving. Capa was always close to combat. He was quoted in both the Skylighters and the Time article, as well as others. If your pictures are not good enough, you aren't close enough. Capa's pictures definitely put him in the middle of the action as he was moving towards the different events that were occurring around him. This picture was published in Life magazine. There's a whole story on how it was able to get published and the different problems with the film that they had available. Capa's audience, mainly other Americans. Life magazine, while probably available at different posts around the where U.S. soldiers were stationed, was not something sold or available elsewhere. Um, After the war, it was in various exhibitions. It's on various websites. Lots of different places reference it and even sell different reprints of it. One of the main ones that I found was an exhibition called Pictures for the Press that was at the J. Paul Getty Museum. The photograph came to be that Capa was one of only very few journalists to be at the D-Day landings. He was actually only one of four who had a pass to be on the boats that were at the landings, according to the Time article. Most other images were lost. Other images that were taken by other photographers that day had been accidentally dropped into the sea by the colonel who was gathering up all the images to take them along. And then mistakes in the development process. The person developing the photos that Capa had been able to deliver unfortunately made a mistake in the processing of them, and a lot of the photos were damaged beyond being visible, which also resulted. The Time article and Skylighters article covered mistakes in development, where the emulsion was left to be too hot, which melted most of the other pictures, and only these 11 pictures were available, which included the Omaha 1944 landings. The power of this image was largely that it was a turning point in the war. The Allies were now on the offensive, trying to march through Europe and retake it back, and eventually get to Berlin and end the war. This is a decisive moment in one of the most studied times of history in recent memory. The D-Day landings were the turning point in World War II, which is one of the most studied wars in history, especially with all the media that Capa helped create that allow historians to discover it. The framing of the photo on the individual, again, showing that individual struggle, helping people humanize the conflict and be able to understand, at least to a point, the people who were in it. The image lives on. It is part of the Magnificent 11, which references the total number of pictures that were still viable on the film. Um, the Time article called this the definitive image of the Normandy landing, the image of the soldier specifically, as well as the 11 in total. One of the impacts was personal for Capa. He was less prone to be in those more dangerous situations. He had two instances where he was quoted saying, "This was my last chance to return to the beach. I did not go," and that was after loading wounded from the boat he left on to deliver the film. He did not return on the other boats headed towards the beach. In the Skylighters article, Capa also was known to say that he vowed never to risk his life in the same way again. Another ongoing way for this photo to exist was that Spielberg used Kappa's photos and others like them, specifically his beach landing ones, for the famous scene in Saving Private Ryan at the beginning of the movie during the landings on the beaches. Also, 60 years later, there was an article in Time magazine that covered these photos and talked about Kappa and what happened that day to the different soldiers and his photos, and how it was that they were able to kind of capture this moment in time. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you feel that you have more of a grasp of Kappa's photo of Omaha Beach 1944. Um, any questions and comments, please leave them below in the D2L comment section. Thank you.